The funeral service for former First Lady Rosalynn Carter is set for today. The wife of former President Jimmy Carter died on November 19th. She was 96 years old. Her invitation-only funeral is being held at the Baptist Church in Plains, Georgia, where the Carters have been members since returning home from the White House, becoming the longest married presidential couple in American history along the way. Rosalynn Carter's funeral follows a wreath-laying on Monday and a tribute service on Tuesday, where she was remembered as someone who felt most comfortable helping those in need. Her daughter, Amy, read a letter President Carter wrote to her 75 years ago while he was serving in the Navy.
While I am away, I try to convince myself that you really are not, could not be, as sweet and beautiful as I remember. But when I see you, I fall in love with you all over again. Does that seem strange to you? It doesn't to me. Goodbye, darling. Until tomorrow. Jimmy.
Rosalynn will be buried in a plot. She will be there with her husband. And it is in view of the front porch of their home where the 39th American president still lives today. Here to talk more about Rosalynn Carter's legacy, political historian Rich Rubino. Rich, some of these stories of their love affair over 7+ decades is truly incredible. And as you listen to the personal stories from her children and others, what did you take away from what those close to her want the public to know about Rosalynn?
I think part of it is the personal views of Rosalynn Carter as opposed to the politician or opposed to kind of, I think, what people are kind of groomed to believe of Rosalynn Carter. You're seeing kind of, for example, the fact that she was involved in donkey basketball at Plains High School as a fundraiser for Chip Carter, one of her sons. It's a very kind of interesting, just an interesting vantage point. And you do see this sometimes in funerals with families, because I think public figures sometimes, the public only sees them through their own prism. This is kind of very much a personal prism that we're looking through.
Yeah, indeed. And she will be buried, as I mentioned, at her home in Plains within view of the family's front porch. Talk about the Carter family's attachment, personal attachment to this place.
Yes, it's very interesting. Many times former presidents, when they leave office, they make a lot of money. They can make literally $1 million giving one speech sometimes. The Carters are very interesting because they literally live in the same house that Jimmy Carter actually literally just about built himself in Plains, Georgia. And when the president left office, they could have basically lived anywhere. Instead, they didn't even go back to Atlanta. They actually went back to Plains, Georgia. This is really the community that in many respects made Jimmy Carter president. And Rosalynn was very much instrumental in that. Because remember, after 1974, when Jimmy Carter was announcing his presidential candidacy, he was extremely obscure, diminutive name recognition. They had a year to essentially make him the front runner for the Democratic presidential nomination. And they did that. About 500 members of the Peanut Brigade, what they called, came from Georgia, traveled to Iowa, traveled to New Hampshire, went door to door, did all the retail politicking, to the point that Jimmy Carter shocked the world and came in second place. Rosalynn was very much instrumental in that. And certainly the people of Plains, Georgia, were very much instrumental in making Jimmy Carter, who was really a very unlikely nominee, the nominee of the party, and eventually winning the presidency despite only having been governor for one term of Georgia.
And finally, when we talk about her legacy and her impact, so many talk about how she redefined not only the role of the First Lady in the White House, but the role of a first couple after they leave the White House and the work that they did together for so many decades. Will that be the strongest legacy she will leave behind?
Yes, I think when people remember her, that's what they're going to be remembered. But I think in actuality, part of it is actually the political legacy, and that's really what's overlooked. Specifically, in 1976, in the Florida primary, George Wallace, the governor of Alabama, was considered the front runner, and he was a Southern candidate. And the thought process was that if George Wallace were to upend Carter in the Florida primary, Jimmy Carter would probably have to drop out of the race. Rosalynn Carter spent an inordinate amount of time in Florida campaigning in a Southern accent, actually getting support from some Florida newspapers who wanted Robin Askew, the governor of Florida himself, to run for president, to the point that Jimmy Carter won the Florida primary, became the de facto candidate of the South, and really kind of a new South that was less segregationist and that was more open to the idea of everybody kind of assimilating. That was very much Rosalynn Carter. And had Jimmy Carter not won that Florida primary, Jimmy Carter most likely never would have been the nominee and would have been just a footnote a one-term governor who tried the presidency in American history.
And thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.